Sean.
Mike?
What is this? A crossover episode? Yowza, yowza, bo, bowza. Oh no, you're sad. You're doing the sad thing.
It's still the sad music.
Wow.
I don't know if it'll get happy before the end.
Yeah, probably not. Welcome, everybody, to What Is This, a crossover episode, a BoJack Horseman podcast starring the Squid Boys. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And we are the Squid Boys.
We don't do that normally.
No,
I don't think.
No, I don't think we do. You went with it, though. You're very quick on your feet today.
Thank you.
So we've been covering BoJack Horseman, the show. And as you guys know, because this is season 3, episode 11.
Hello to all our new listeners.
And all the new listeners came in, as we talked about at the podcast norm, season 3, episode 6.
True.
I don't know if you remember that bit, but we had a bit 6 months ago where I kept saying season 3, episode 6 is where all the typically podcast listeners come in. So,
Mike, I don't want to say that we're stale, but I think we've had that bit every episode for the last season.
You think so?
I think every episode we've made that joke at least once.
I don't know. I edited them, and I don't think we've made it in a few. So, time will tell.
We definitely made it last episode.
So this episode, we're covering maybe one of the saddest episodes so far, season 3, episode 11. That's Too Much, Man. It's a 9.6 on IMDb. BoJack gets Sarah Lynn to break her sobriety to help drown his depression and experiences the next few months through blackouts. I mentioned this has a 9.6, one of the highest rated episodes of BoJack Horseman in the collection.
Yeah.
And our man Edvis, 1997, has a review for us.
Okay.
9 out of 10. And as custom, he put a 9 in the subject heading. And Edvis says, it was a real nice episode, but now BoJack is in big trouble, LOL.
Now?
I like the LOL. There might be some people out there saying, Mike, Edvis is a bit you're doing. It's not. I wish I was this funny. I wish I was as funny as Edvis. This is not a bit.
I do really want, like the pasta strainers that still haven't come to fruition.
Yeah.
I really want Edvis to show up in season 6.
Yeah.
For the podcast.
Sure. He is the pasta strainers of our podcast. It's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Sean, I had this epiphany while I was showering. This episode aired on July 22nd, 2016. But in this episode and in multiple episodes this season, they flash back to 2007.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, why not we go back to today's date, September 16th, 2007, and see what was going on.
I feel like it's awful. Bush is still president.
Well, I could have thought about, I did think about if we recorded on September 11th going back in time, but I thought maybe that wouldn't turn out well. So we're gonna check out what was going on September 16th, 2007. The 59th Emmy Awards. The Sopranos, 30 Rock, James Spader, and Sally Field win. They don't say for what, for those two, but good for them. Federation Cup Women's Tennis, Moscow, Russia. Svetlana Kuznetsova beats Francesca Schiavone of Italy.
Those sound like BoJack Horseman character names.
4-6, 7-6, 7-5 to give Russia an unassailable 3-0 lead, and it ends 4-0, by the way, just a little into the future. 1-2 Go Airlines Flight 269 carrying 128 crew members and passengers crashes in Thailand.
No!
I didn't vet this, and I started reading and lost my mind, realizing that people were going to die in a plane crash.
No!
And then
hang on. Hold on. Didn't Lost start right around then? 2007?
2007, maybe. I mean, they landed in Thailand, though. That's not an island.
Well, we don't know where the island is.
That's true.
Oh, it started in 2004.
Yeah, way too late.
I was off by a few years.
Yeah, so some people died in a plane crash. I'm sorry I laughed. That was inappropriate. Solheim Cup Women's Golf, Halmstad GK Sweden. U.S. retains Cup 16-12 after trailing by a point. U.S. dominates singles 8.5 to 3.5. I have no idea what that means.
Yo, they're dominating who?
The Swiss, I think.
What? They're dominating Swiss singles?
They're in Sweden. You know, what goes on in Sweden stays in Sweden. I think that's a saying. Famous deaths. Jean Bachelet, Swiss composer, pedagogo, and conductor, kaleidoscope for trumpet and percussion, dies at 71. I have no idea what that sentence means.
I was able to look him up really quickly, actually.
And then this one is a little close to your heart, Sean.
Okay.
Robert Jordan, American author of the Wheel of Time series, dies from complications from multiple melanoma at age 58.
Yeah. He didn't get to finish the series.
Yeah.
It's pretty, but you know what I will say about that is, I'm going to tangent for just a second here.
Okay.
By that point, he just had a stretch of, I want to say 4 really bad books. 6, 7, 8. 6, 7,
so you're saying it's good he died.
And 9 are really bad. No. Right before he passed, he published one more, 11. And 11 is really good.
Oh, so it's like a swan song. That's good.
So there's kind of a vibe of you, at least when you're reading 11, you're like, okay, you know, at least like
he went out on a high note. Good.
Yeah. And then Brandon Sanderson finished it. So
yeah, that's true. Your best friend, Brando Sando.
My best friend, Brando Sando.
And then finally on the music charts, the number 1 song in the U.S. was Crank That Soulja Boy. Let's fucking go.
That's huge.
And then in the UK.
That song still goes hard.
Yeah, it does. And then the UK, Beautiful Girls by Sean Kingston. Another kind of a banger.
That's a banger.
Yeah, so, you know, besides the plane crash and the people dying, that was a pretty good trip down memory lane.
Look. The plane crash and the people dying is horrible, but
yeah, it is. What do you mean, but?
But for the purposes of the podcast, it made for a very good moment.
Well, it was also better than reading the same bombing one that we do.
Well, and because you didn't know it was coming either.
Yeah, I didn't know the plane crash was there, so that's why I laughed. Not because plane crashes are funny. I'm actually very scared of plane crashes. Anyway, this episode, Sean.
Yes.
That's Too Much, Man. What did you think of this episode before we dive in?
Oh, I hated this episode.
Oh.
I mean, it's really good, but this was painful. This was painful to watch. I mean, like, I hated it in the way that this show wants me to hate. You know, I'm watching it and I'm like, you just keep digging yourself in deeper. And it's almost more painful to watch because he knows that he's doing it.
Right. He knows that he is taking someone and pulling them down with him, but he needs it so badly that he doesn't care.
Yeah. Pulling everyone down with him or trying to.
Right. Anybody who will latch on. Yeah.
I'm very interested to see, because we cut forward a couple months throughout the episode. I'm very interested to see what happened in everybody else's lives in those couple of months where they were BoJack free for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
I feel like there's going to be something really tragic in the next episode where everybody's doing great because he wasn't around.
That's an interesting theory. Yeah, I will tell you, this episode ends on such a note that I, as someone who's seen it before, decided I'm going to watch the next episode.
Oh,
and I watched both. Yep.
Okay.
So the second one's fresh in my memory here. But anyway, let's get in the episode. The episode opens with Sarah Lynn celebrating.
an incredible like musical sequence.
Yeah, it's a Disney princess-esque existence for her. And she's talking to the bees outside and the ants and and she's making herself a smoothie and she's living what would be her best life. She does have a bit of a like weird breakdown about her skin being baby soft. But mostly she's doing fine. And at the end of it, she marks down a 9 months sober on her calendar.
Yay!
And you know what? We should have picked that date.
Too late.
Maybe next episode. She marks down, and immediately BoJack calls her and goes, "Hey, do you want a party?" And she's like, "Oh, thank God, yes!" And rips down the calendar, and there's just a cabinet of booze behind, and she starts chugging, and we go right into the intro there.
And at this point of the episode, Mike, I wrote in my notes, "No, he's responsible for her relapse." And I'm being so honest when I thought into my head, it can't get any worse.
You thought that?
Particularly with Sarah Lynn. I was like, her relapsing is the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah, well.
To her. And
so
I'm no longer so sure about that.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. So we cut after the intro to her house where she's mixing the same kind of smoothie she was making earlier for BoJack, but she's pouring Guten bourbon in there.
Yeah.
A little blueberry acai deal. And she notes acai should just be called blueberries for douchebags.
Acai, I believe.
So she asks him how everything's going, and she continues to turn on the blender every time he talks, and he talks about how he's never felt so alone. And she's like, "You should talk louder, dude." And then bummer about you getting the nomination, and then turning out that you didn't get the nomination. And BoJack's, "Yeah, you know what? I was screwed, and no one was there for me. Not anybody."
Well, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, exactly. He is just a little delusional. And so he says, "Hey, thanks for hanging with me." And she goes, "Of course, everything sucks, especially sobriety. Why would I make my body a temple?"
And she says something interesting.
Temple is super boring. I've been to temple.
Yeah. So I'm probably picking up on something that does not matter at all, but I know that there's a couple different religions that use that as like kind of a description for them when they go to worship. But the one that I always think of most prominently talking about going to temple are Mormons. And I don't know if they've said anything about Sarah Lynn.
I don't remember that.
In my head, I was like, "Oh, was she Mormon?"
Yeah, I think the only thing we really know about Sarah Lynn's home life that they've revealed to us is that she had really shitty parents that pushed her into like child stardom, right? And that I think in one episode she makes a comment about like a weird uncle that molested her or something like that.
Oh, yeah, probably. Look, I know that there's multiple religions that go to that use the like, "Oh, I'm going to temple" or whatever. But the one that I just think of most prominently with that phrase is Mormons. So I wasn't sure if that was something.
Yeah, I don't think they ever, or they haven't at least commented on that at all.
And I don't think they will.
Yeah, we'll see. So we have a Willy Wonka type sequence where she's revealing that her whole house is basically full of drugs, which is makes it, in hindsight, insane that she was sober for 9 months. She has, bowls of Vicodin cover Vicodin. There's crystal meth in vases. The paintings LSD. She snorts her wall, but she goes, "This says it's cocaine," but that's drywall, and they come back to that a couple times.
I don't know if the show's just doing the show. I think is just doing this for a bit, but I do think that if you were to take it more seriously, I do think it says a lot about her that she lives in this walking relapse.
Yeah,
and she hasn't. It seems.
One thing to note here too, she gets alcohol delivered. And when this episode came out, that was not a thing.
Okay.
Like now it's a thing. Like you can get like DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever to Postmates to bring you alcohol. That was 100% not a thing in 2016. Yeah. So like it seems like, "Oh, they got alcohol delivered. What's the bit?" There's no bit. That was just insane at the time. At the time to have someone bring alcohol to your house, especially that much, was insane.
I still feel like that's kind of, I guess maybe you can do that, but I maybe just around here, it might be a little more strict, but
no, you can. I mean, where I live, you can, and I live in a decently conservative area. You can get fucking alcohol delivered. Like, they do not care.
Do you guys do the thing where you can't have alcohol in grocery stores?
No, you can have them in grocery stores. You just can't buy them on Sunday in certain counties.
So we're not even allowed to have alcohol in our grocery stores.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you have to go to a beer or liquor store. Yeah,
good for the beer and liquor stores.
I think that you might be able to technically, but I do think that there is I think there's stricter about it with needing IDs and stuff.
Yeah, you might be right. They definitely weren't strict on it back then. I can tell you that, or they definitely were strict on it back then.
I don't know for a fact. Whenever I want to get drunk, I got to go get stuff. So, maybe this is going to change my life. Maybe I'm about to turn into Sarah Lynn.
I'm so sorry, Sean. Don't let me be your BoJack. So they start drinking and they start reminiscing about horse around episodes like they often do. It's the thing that they really connect on. Obviously, it's only maybe 2 other people in the world have the same experience, but they always seem to have more of a connection on it than the other 2 kids from the show.
They seem they're the only 2 that like each other.
Yeah. you know? It definitely seems that way. And they talk about an episode where Ethan got a boner, or Brad, she calls him Brad because that's his real name. Yeah. Because there was a swimsuit model in the scene, and BoJack's like, "What?" And I don't remember that. And she goes, "Oh, well, we got to watch that one." And so they start this bender.
The first cut, I was like, "Oh my God." It's really effective.
Yeah, they do this really cool I'm trying to think of the word. They unfocus everything and then refocus it. They cut the black and then refocus it, and it's basically BoJack blacking out. Every time that happens, it's supposed to signify him blacking out, and we forward some moment in time.
I feel like it's the most accurate. I've never blacked out, but I feel like it's the most accurate. Even of just sometimes you have those sleeps that you don't, or at least you don't remember dreams, but you just close your eyes and you're open and you're like, oh fuck.
I slept for 6 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like this is the best I've ever seen that portrayed.
Yeah.
In media.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff in BoJack where I would say that, and we'll get to more as we move on, but there's just, man, that's really how that feels, or that's really that's portrayed really well. So
yeah.
He starts talking about how buildings should be rectangles, and he goes, "Wait, what were we talking about?" And then she conveys to him that time has passed because he pretended to be a mummy, and then he decided Egypt was stupid because of pyramids.
Hey, pyramids are cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been playing too much Assassin's Creed Origins.
Yeah, maybe. But he goes, "Man, that sounds like me, but I don't remember any of that. Maybe I blacked out. I should lay off the alcohol." And then he blacks out instantly again, and it ends with... They're in the kitchen, and he goes, "And I said, 'You're sitting on the pizza, Mr. President.'"
I am concerned about the fact that he seems to be I don't know if this is just a narrative tool for this specific bender, but the fact that he's consistently blacking out, even when it seems like he's coming back, and it doesn't feel like he does anything really to escalate it again. It's just happening, is deeply concerning.
Well, and here's what's really brilliant about this episode is they cut to the kitchen, and the kitchen's a nightmare. Right?
Yeah.
There's cigarettes all over the counter. There's pills. There's toilet paper. She's laying on the counter. And he's like, "I had another blackout," the thing we were just talking about, and then he blacks out again instantly, and you cut back to the living room, which is in an even worse state than it was. And they're watching the episode of Horsing Around where Brad is the boner. But you can see BoJack has gigantic bags under his eyes. He has pit stains in his jacket. He's got stains all over. There's all kinds of pizza and Jack Spaniels and stuff just strewn all over. And he goes, that's not a boner, that's a shadow. But they show the episode, and Brad's standing there like covering his boner the whole time with like a book. And then her line is, the Armenian genocide, that's too much, man. These kids covering his boner. It's really fucking funny.
Well, they say, I think Bojack says, I don't know if it's here or later, or I think it's in this because it's the only part where they're watching the show. But Bojack in the show says, I think we all learned an important lesson about the Armenian genocide.
Yeah, and she says, that's too much, man.
I was like, oh my God.
And then they reminisce.
Hey, you know what? Good for BoJack Horseman. I feel like that was like kind of ahead of their time.
Sarah Lynn says something interesting here where BoJack is like, man, why couldn't everything just be like horsing around, everything settled in 22 minutes? And she's like, how is that not child labor? I didn't know what I was signing up for. I was 3. And it's the first in a pattern of her lamenting things in her life throughout this episode. And BoJack,
he doesn't really care.
No, he doesn't. He just kind of goes, I'm depressed. Let's do something fun. And she's like, hey, you know what really kicks ass? The planetarium. You get crazy high in the parking lot, and you get your mind blown by the trippy galaxies. And he's like, yeah, let's do that. But then he blacks out, and they're at an AA meeting. And there's a guy on stage talking about how he continued to be in a terrifying cycle of drinking, lifting my head up, drinking, lifting my head up. And it's one of those fucking birds that dips its beak in the water.
And Sarah Lynn has a killer line where she's like drinking at the meeting, and BoJack, and because she's like, oh, I can't wait to get my 9 months like sober thing. And BoJack's like, you can't get that. You're fucking drinking. And she's like, what? Just because I'm drinking means I can't be sober? And he's like, yes, that's literally what it means.
Right.
And she goes, nowhere in the 12 steps does it say to not drink. Yeah. Loophole. I mean,
it might not say that. So then a snail gets up there, or a slug, and he goes, my rock bottom was when I actually woke up under a rock. And BoJack is not having this, okay?
He boos.
And he starts booing, and she's like, hey, you're not supposed to boo. And then he gets up, and he's like, you guys haven't done anything bad. And the bird goes, actually, one time I used character actress Ann Dowd to help sabotage my roommate's hip opera so he wouldn't move out. And BoJack's like, oh, that's child's play. It's baby stuff. And he goes up there and starts telling the story of Penny.
Yeah.
And doesn't really, this is the first time I think he's ever admitted this to anybody.
Yeah.
And he says, I went down to see this girl I knew in New Mexico, and she had a young daughter named Penny. Penny Carson, that's her real name. You can look her up. I don't care. I tried to sleep with the mom. She said no. Then I tried to sleep with the daughter, and then the mom walked in on me trying to sleep with the daughter, and I was all like, oopsie doopsie, exit stage right. And the worst part is I don't even know what happened. Did I ruin the family? Did I scar that little girl for life? So he's just like going on, and Sarah Lynn's sitting there like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like trying to like prove to him that he's like the most fucked up person.
Yeah. Well, he says when he's going up, he says most of this is stuff I do on a daily basis while completely sober.
Right.
You know, he's like, what you guys see as bad is my normal.
And he's like, where's my trophy or my chip?
Yeah.
And he blacks out, and he's driving. Wake comes to driving. He's hitting stop signs, and not much time has passed because she's like, I've never seen them cancel an AA meeting because everybody got so bummed out. And he's like, what do you mean? You told him about Penny, and then you went on and on that you were never going to change, and then you chased the slug around threatening to pour salt on his head. And BoJack doesn't have any recollection of this. He's like, I talked about Penny, and she's like, yeah, I've done some messed up stuff before, but most of us aren't as proud of it as you are. And he seems more sober in this moment, and he's like, hey, I'm not proud. I feel really terrible. I might have messed her up for life. And Sarah Lynn's like, well, I looked her up on Facebook. She's going to college. She seems to be doing fine. You shouldn't worry about it. And
At some point, he hits somebody while driving in that whole sequence. He just fucking blows over somebody.
There's the end of it, well, first of all, she introduced the concept of making amends.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it doesn't matter if you make amends, you just keep doing shitty stuff afterwards. She goes, no, then you just dirty the slate up again and you make amends again. It's a never-ending cycle where you always end up feeling good about yourself. Yeah, and that's when he hits a guy.
there's something there, right? Like, I don't know, and I don't know that that's exactly the right takeaway, but...
Well, it's a very Catholic way of looking at things, isn't it?
It is. It's better than he's doing. It's healthier than what he's got. I don't know if I would say that it's completely healthy.
And then at the end of it, he hits I don't remember the character's name, but Mr. Peanut Butter's manager.
Yeah, the lemur dude.
The lemur guy. He hits this kid's playhouse and then insults him for having a lame ass playhouse.
Yeah.
It's pretty ridiculous.
This poor dude.
Right. And then Sarah Lynn's like, you got to use parallel joints to support that foundation, dumb shit. Like they're just this poor man. And he goes, hey, I do feel better. We should go make more amends with other people. And they show up at Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane's home. And it seems like no one's there. And he's like, well, I'm not leaving until I make amends with Diane. So he knows where a spare key is, but then falls through a window. And they trash their fucking kitchen, just eat. And well, it doesn't look like they eat much, honestly. They just kind of like go through everything to the point where like you would probably call the police on these two people if you found them in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And so they start trying to role play as Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter, and they put on their clothes. And there's this reference to Daria. Have we talked about Daria before?
I don't think so.
So you don't know this reference at all?
No, I don't.
So Daria is a character, I believe, who spun off of Beavis and Butthead.
Okay.
And she was a girl they went to school with that they made fun of. But then she got her own show on MTV. And literally, it's almost like they did it intentionally, designing Diane after Daria.
Oh, okay.
If you look her up, she wears a green jacket, she has glasses, she has dark hair. And she's like the whole... I never really liked the show, even though I'm in the age range that it was for. But a lot of people liked it around the time, and it unlike Beavis and Butthead, Beavis and Butthead was just like a music video show that they put like interstitials around. This was just like an actual television show on MTV, and she goes, "What is she like? An Asian Daria?" is what she says here on the show. And I think that was a criticism they got early on in the show.
Okay.
And I think that's them like kind of going, ha ha ha,
Yeah.
But like she looks so much like Daria, Sean. I can't believe that that's not their intention originally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like if you look up a picture of her, it's like insane.
It is. I looked up the show and it is very close. I also got way sidetracked because I looked at the cast. And one of the supporting actors, or supporting voices, is Mark Thompson, who is a voice actor, but most well known for me by being like the audiobook narrator for Star Wars.
Oh, really?
Like, I mean, he's probably done 50 Star Wars audiobooks. Like, he's the guy that like does a majority of the Star Wars audiobooks.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he was a supporting character on Daria.
Well, a small world, right?
Yeah.
But she kind of goes, she's like an Asian Daria, and he goes, well, she's a little more complex than that, and she goes, but she's basically Asian Daria, right? Which I think is like something. If I remember correctly, that was like some like comments about the show that people were giving early on. But Bojack tells her to shut up, and he's like, all right, I'm Mr. Peanut Butter, so you make amends to me, and I'll be Mr. Carolyn, and you be Princess Diana. And they start taking off their clothes, and then the camera cuts out to show Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter standing there removing the clothes, and Mr. Peanut Butter's like, should we do something about this? And they're like, hey, why don't you guys sleep this off in our guest room? And they're like, oh my God, that mirror's talking to us. You can't stop us. We're going to run from the future. We're making amends, assholes. And they push them down, and Diane breaks her hand again, or her arm. As BoJack pushes her down, it looks limp, and they get out of there. And so these guys are just running amok right now. We don't know how much time has passed. We don't know, but clearly some time has passed. We cut back to the car, and BoJack has a spaghetti strainer on his head, and you see because they took their car.
Yes.
They took Mr. Peanut Butter's car, and there's spaghetti strainers in the back. So, it's pretty insane that they're kind of getting away with this.
Uh-huh.
And BoJack's like, all right, next stop, Todd. And as he puts his jacket back on, he punches the window out. Because he's just so zonked. They are so under the influence. It's like the craziest bender you can imagine. And we cut to BoJack in a park, and you see, like, just slightly off screen, a yellow hat that looks like Todd's, and he's apologizing to Todd. But it's just a little kid. And Sean,
this is the craziest part of the episode. What the reference they're doing here is, I feel like, I don't know if I want to say it's ahead of its time, because people definitely knew about it at this point, but I think that this was a reference that was more kind of like an open secret that everybody knew, but nobody really like cared too much about until there was that HBO documentary in 2019. So like 3 years later, where it felt like everybody started caring again about this. But
right.
They do the Michael Jackson thing, where the parents are like, oh, are you having like, why are you touching our son like that? Oh, you're BoJack Horseman. Like, you're famous. Like, and the mom is like, do you think that he's inappropriately interested in our boy? And the dad's like, well, that could make us even more famous. And as BoJack is leaving, they're like, hey, do you want to take him with you? Maybe have a sleepover? And I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's really fucking dark.
Yeah. It's and there are people that, that with the Michael Jackson thing, I never ended up watching that documentary that everybody really, that from what I
didn't
understand.
Watch all of it. I watched a little bit of it, and I was like, I can't do this.
It sounds like there were a lot of bad people involved in that, including him yourself. Not him yourself, Michael Jackson himself.
Oh no, this is like Louis C.K. already. And also, I think specifically the part of this is the parents were in that scenario were like really bad,
right?
And that's kind of what they're referencing here, is less so the Michael Jackson part of it, and more the parents being willing to kind of exploit their child and look the other way, even though they know this terrible thing is happening, which is almost, I think, the more poignant point to make.
Well, BoJack, even in all his, drunken stupor and on drugs, goes, no offense, Todd, but your parents are creeping me out.
Yeah.
So even he in his, state can go, oh my God. And then comically, the car just starts rolling in front of them, and Sarah Lynn's chasing it. Yeah. But we black out again, and we are in Anna Spanakovida's apartment. And she's like, what do you want, BoJack? And he's like, I don't know. I'm very drunk and a little nauseous, but I'm here in your house. It must be to make amends. So he just doesn't even know. And we get this really funny sequence. First, he's like, hey, you disappeared when I needed you most. I must have done something wrong. And she's like, hey, I thought you were a winner. I was wrong. This is hard for me, too. I staked my reputation. And he's like, no, this isn't about the Oscars. You left me like we were more than that. And, he just, like, doesn't understand why, she wouldn't be with him. And so she starts telling this story about how she was a lifeguard. And as she's telling it, he blacks out. And then they're in the car, and he's like, oh, I gotta know what she said. So they go back. And each time Sarah Lynn is doing something more unhinged. First she burns the ottoman, then she's spray painting suck a dick dumb shits on a painting. And so he's like, you got to tell me again. She's like, all right, I'll tell you again if it makes you leave. And she starts telling the same story. And in the middle of or the same lifeguard spot, he cuts out again. And she's like, oh, you want to go back to Anna's, don't you? And he goes, I feel like I definitely get it this time. And then it's like lifeguard. And then he blacks out again. And then Sarah Lynn is like, I wrote it down and says, I'm a lifeguard. This woman's house smells weird, or is that me? Pay attention, Sarah Lynn. Don't do that thing where you write down your thoughts instead of what the person is actually saying. I wonder if it's time to get my boobs done again. And he's like, that's very helpful. Who's next? So that's good enough for him.
Yeah.
You know, that to make amends at this point. Then we're outside Tabbywood, where Princess Carolyn lives, and Ralph is there, the Riz Master.
Yeah.
And he's just screaming, I'm sorry, at her balcony on top of the car. And Ralph walks out, and she's just kind of disappointed, and he puts his hand on her shoulder, and they walk back in together. Which, huge for Princess Carolyn.
I mean, great for her.
Yeah. Huge.
And then BoJack goes back to Anna, and I want to read this fucking
read the actual story
because it's insane.
It's important to point out too. He goes, "Hey, I know I was just here bothering you." And she goes, "Just here? I haven't seen you in 2 weeks."
It's like, oh,
and you're like, "Oh shit."
No. And first of all, the way she introduces the story is hilarious, and then it becomes not hilarious because she says, "I became a lifeguard to never be weaker than water," which is. Right, a crazy thing to say.
But she's referencing the story she told a couple episodes ago where she almost drowned and swam up. That's
still a crazy thing to say.
Yeah,
even,
for sure.
Even with the context, that's still insane. And then she says, there are going to be times... And in the context of being a lifeguard, this is also insane advice to have been given. But they say, there are going to be times when you'll see someone in trouble. You're going to want to rush in there and do whatever you can to save them. But you have to stop yourself because there are some people you can't save because those people will thrash and struggle and try to take you down with them. Which is like some really poignant like life advice. But
bad lifeguard advice.
In the context of her career at the time... Not the greatest. I do just love that she like, because this is right. She did this 2 episodes ago too, where she'll give some like pretty decent advice, but it doesn't apply at all to the situation that she's referencing from. Yeah, and I think that's very funny.
But then there's a funny moment because there's just a pause of silence, and he goes, "What does that have to do with me?" And then he blacks out again. And then we are interestingly driving somewhere where there's snow.
And it gets so much worse.
And we're in Ohio, where Penny happens to go to school. And Sarah Lynn goes, I wanted to go to the planetarium, but you demanded we come here. She's wearing one of those beer hats that has the beers on the side, but it's 2 bottles of vodka.
Which, hey, I can get down with that.
Right. The spaghetti strainer box is now full of empty bottles.
That's true.
Yep. And we black out again, and because BoJack's like, hey, we need to turn the car around, and I'm going to turn it around right now, and then he blacks out. And then they're in the library, and he's like, I feel like we didn't turn the car around. And she's like, no, we did, but then you turned the car back around.
This is when my notes just turned into different variations of, oh my God, holy shit, what the fuck?
She also mentions there's a whole makeover sequence where they went to the mall and tried on trench coats, and BoJack doesn't remember, and she's a bit offended by that.
Yeah.
And BoJack's like, this is insane. I already scarred her for life. I can't see her again. It's going to make it worse. And this is when Sarah Lynn says, hey, do you think it's too late for me to go back to college? And he again, isn't really listening to her. And she mentions that, you know, she might have mentioned earlier, or no, this is when she says, I've always wanted to be an architect, but one of those architects where at night she's a high-end call girl, and by day she's an international super spy. And then he's like, when is she an architect? I don't know, frontier times? No, I didn't mean what era. And he's trying to, but then Penny walks in, And does she look emotionally damaged? No, she's just going to computer. She's probably in a sex chat room with some middle-aged person because that's the only way she can feel love, which is just like the worst thing that Sarah Lynn could say. No, she says not in person. She's a middle-aged horse.
Yeah. And then when she's like, no, she's probably like looking up how she wants to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's
So Sarah Lynn's like, can we go back to LA now? And he goes, yes. But then he's like, we black out. He's like, obviously, I wanted to continue to stalk Penny because I'm an idiot. So I'm going to write follow Penny on this hand. And then on this hand, I'll write. And then he blacks out again. And he goes, God damn it. We're just doing what the hand said. Because he only got to write follow Penny and donut.
Yeah.
And she's at like a party drinking a Red Bull.
There's another terrible fucking line here that Sarah Lynn gives where she's like, you were a father figure who was sexually inappropriate to me and I turned out fine.
Right.
And I was like, I was like, oh my God.
Penny runs into this like acapella group.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, I love your guys' sound. And they're like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's like, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
But we're just like, hey, she seems fine. You know, maybe she has a dark secret. Maybe I didn't ruin her life. And that's when Sarah Lynn says the sexually inappropriate thing. But then BoJack says, hey, I got to pee and then we'll go. But then he knocks over the acapella group and Penny sees him. And she's like, did you come here to find me? And he's like, no, and she goes, I don't want to see you here. You can't be here. And
the shots of her are really good too. There's this really nice lighting on it that is just like, she's kind of like, there's a little bit of light in her, but she's like surrounded by shadows. And it's just, it looks really good.
Everybody starts to notice it's him. And he gets surrounded and people are taking pictures. And he's like, Penny, no, I'm sorry. And she like sulks away. Very uncomfortable body language. And then we're back in the car and Sarah Lynn's like, hey, on the bright side, she seemed okay until she saw you and freaked out. So she probably would have been fine if you never showed up.
In a way, it's like you destroyed her life twice.
Right, yeah. Just a crazy thing to say.
And then she says, dick sucked by a dumb shit.
Yep.
Which really, thank you, lightens the mood.
She also says, next time, could you almost molest somebody who's in Hawaii? I could be bummed out at a luau right now.
And then they decide to do
BoJack
heroin.
So she finds it in the glove compartment. He has a bag of BoJack from when earlier on in the season. And she's like, man, that's so cool. There's Billy Crystal Meth, Angel Dustin Hoffman, Lucille 8-Ball, and now you. Congrats. And she's like, we have to do it. And he's kind of like, I don't know. You know that old saying, liquor before beer, never fear. Don't do heroin.
That's really good.
And he even says, I'm not going to do it with you. I'm not going to shoot heroin with you. And then we cut to her house. He goes, we're going to snort it like sophisticated adults. And they snort it off the Horse and Around DVDs. And this is where shit really starts to go wild for BoJack. He ends up in a flashback, and Cuddly Whiskers are there, and he goes, Happy Thanksgiving, 2007. And he goes, why did you just say what year it was? You know, because clearly they're just trying to tell us that the...
Yeah.
And they make a meta joke about the disjointed blackout structure of the episode, and the flashback in the middle really confused our audience with the BoJack Horseman show. They hated all the fourth wall breaking meta jokes. Audiences hate meta jokes. When will comedy writers ever learn?
So... the important part that I am not certain if we've seen before and I'm forgetting it, or if this is continuing to piece together pieces of their past. But I know that we've gotten to the point where the BoJack Horseman show is airing, and we now know from this that each episode is worse than the last, and each episode is getting worse ratings than the last. It's established at some point, I can't remember if it's in this episode or an earlier episode, that after horsing around, Sarah Lynn is like a pop star.
She's almost like Britney Spears in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they've already said this, but the implication that I got from this, because they start talking about we need a guest star to boost ratings. What about Sarah Lynn? And so
the implication is that she's way more famous at this point, and that's the case.
Well, and my reading is, did he bring her back for BoJack Horseman show and ruin her? Then too.
Yes.
What I don't know if they've said that explicitly or if we're gonna find that out, but that was kind of how I read it. Was like, yeah. Anyways,
well, okay. Here's the thing: when we start the show and we first meet Sarah Lynn, she is revealed to be a successful pop star who is starting to fade because she's in her 30s now.
Okay, so he doesn't ruin it.
He doesn't ruin her career. I will tell you that scene leads to another scene in the next episode that we'll see.
Okay.
Actually, very quickly in the next episode.
Okay.
But it's not exactly what you think, but you're not necessarily on the wrong track.
Okay.
And so he wakes up from this flashback, and she's like, "You were mumbling. You had to ask me something," because Cuddly, like you said, Cuddly Whiskers wants him to ask her to be a guest star on their failing show. And so he starts to, we have a flashback. He's like, "How long have we known each other?" And then we're on the pier that we've been on before on the bench. And he's like, "It feels like we've known each other our entire lives, and we were on a TV show together. Isn't that insane?"
And she does say, when he's like, "We've known each other our entire lives," she's like, "Yeah, for me, that's pretty much true." Which is like, oh.
And he's also like, no one understands what we went, or no one understands because we were on that show together, and nobody understands what we went through who wasn't on that show, she says. And then, by the way, just to comment, they all look terrible. They both look awful. Yeah. Pit stains. Yeah. His jacket's tearing. They both have really big bags on their eyes. But they're sitting there kind of having what would be a nice moment if not for the heroin and all the other drugs. And he goes,
and the fact that it's still very weird. Like, the fact that he is like, "You're the only person I can relate to," is incredibly concerning, because they're not at the same level, right? Like, in terms of age and maturity and stuff. Like, they are, but they shouldn't be. I think is more the issue, So there is still like, to me, this scene, even though it is like kind of framed as a like they're having a nice moment together, it's still overshadowed by all of this. Like, yes, this relationship is having a nice moment right now, but it's built on a foundation of just like fucking terribleness.
Yeah. So he starts commenting how people always want something from you, and they want you to save their agency. They want to sleep on their couch and eat all your food, but we don't want that. We don't want anything from each other. And as he says that, we cut to this shot of them laying on a dirty hotel mattress, holding hands still. And BoJack's like, I never figured out what love meant. I just feel it. I don't need to figure it out. I love you, Sarah Lynn. And he's like, "Sarah Lynn?"
No.
Sarah Lynn? And she's like, "What?" Jumps alive.
I was very concerned. And I was right to be, but not quite yet.
Yeah. So she wakes up and she's like, I'm not okay. I'm bored. This hotel room is boring. What's on TV? And we turn it on, and it's Wiz Khalifa, actually played by Wiz Khalifa, and it's the Oscars. And they've been on this bender, obviously, for months, because the last known time in the timeline was the Oscar nominations, which that usually is months, right?
Yeah, about 3 months or so beforehand.
And Sarah Lynn talks about how she loves the Oscars, and it's all the magic of Hollywood wrapped up in one exciting night. And the winner for Best Original Song is the Silly Banana song Love Theme from The Nazi Who Played Yahtzee by Sarah Lynn. And Wiz Khalifa's like, "Get your ass up here, girl." And she's like, "Oh, I won. I forgot I was even nominated." And her bear manager answers, and he's like, "I accept this on her behalf. And if you're watching this, Sarah Lynn, wherever you are, please come home." And it's just, she gets very sad in this moment, obviously.
So sad.
And she's like, "I should have been there." And then she should have been. She won an Oscar, like, And she starts lamenting a lot of this. You know, if you would have told me I won an Oscar, I'd never believe it. And now I've done it. And, she's like, she starts going into about how she doesn't really like anything about herself.
She's totally losing it.
These boobs aren't me. This house isn't me. And he's like, we're not at your house right now. The only reason I wear this shirt is because some company paid me $8,000 to wear it. I don't even need the money. So she's really having a moment. And Bojack kind of tries to pep talk her like, hey, it's all going to be okay. And she asked, hold on, I have it right here. Where did it go? What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. Am I doomed? Are you doomed? Are we all doomed? Which is just like, holy shit. And he goes, and I'll tell you, we're going to be fine. And I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go to the planetarium. And she finally, after months, he's listening to what she wanted. And Neil deGrasse Tyson tells us about the planets. And they're sitting there watching it. It's actually a really cool shot. It's almost like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 shot.
Yeah.
With just their silhouettes. And she's talking about how she thinks domes are cool, and they're having kind of a moment. But again, this is all like sinister in nature, like you said. And she goes, I want to be an architect, and kind of lays her head on his shoulder. And
here, there's a speech here that I want to read.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is, he goes, we're not doomed. In the great grand scheme of things, we're just tiny specks that will one day be forgotten. So it doesn't matter what we did in the past or how we'll be remembered. The only thing that matters is right now. This moment, this one spectacular moment we are sharing together. And then she doesn't respond.
In the same way she did just earlier in the episode, we get, right, Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn, and the episode cuts. So, Sean, is Sarah Lynn dead?
I think no.
Okay. Explain.
I think she's going to be alive, but I think their relationship is ruined forever.
Okay. So
I think.
Okay.
I think she's going to be alive, but I think that this is going to be like a serious enough thing that it's like, okay, it's finally time to call it quits on this.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll see if you're right or not. I'm not going to tip my hand here. But what a sobering ending to an episode of television.
Yeah.
And it's just what a terrible episode of television. But a good one, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, this episode's kind of I mean, let's talk about it.
I mean, it's just that speech at the end, I think, is very poignant and very much I think is interesting that there's a moment in the Stormlight Archive that is very similar to this one of talking about this. I mean, pretty like, I mean, they pretty much say like, since we all go to the same place in the end, the moments we spent with each other are the only things that do matter, the times we helped each other. So it's pretty fucking close to what he's saying. And it really got me in that book, and it really got me again here. It's I don't know. It's a difficult episode. You know, I almost am not sure how long you can keep following Bojack like this.
What do you mean?
I don't know how much lower there is to go. Like,
yeah, I mean,
and there's 3 more seasons, you know?
Yeah.
So I know that there must be, but
and
I can't imagine it.
I don't know if it's about how low do you go, but it's maybe unpacking why. You know?
I mean, yeah, that's true. We've gotten hints of his past, but we haven't delved fully into it.
Season 4 definitely deals a lot with the why, and it's a very good season because of it. But yeah,
my guess that I'm gonna give is I don't think he's gonna be better. I don't think we're gonna get a neat resolution at the end of the season. I feel like at the end, at this point, they probably were like, okay, we can start planning for a longer run, you know? We don't need to like wrap it up every season. Because the second season wrapped up pretty clean too, right? When they went to the Giggle ship and stuff, and I feel like it was a pretty clean ending. Comparatively, at least. And my based on you saying that season 4 gets into the why, I feel like he's gonna be at his lowest point for a while now, while we explore how he can possibly get better.
Yeah.
Is kind of where I would guess from what you've said.
Yeah. I mean, that's that. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. We still got 1 episode left this season, Sean. But before we talk about that, why don't we talk about the categories for this episode?
Yes.
What was your favorite animal-based joke?
I think it was the salt on the slug's head.
See, I liked the bird tipping his head down and drink. Tip his head down and drink. I thought that was pretty good. Him being an alcoholic is really funny to me.
Yeah.
What about your favorite bit?
I don't know if this is a bit. It's not a bit because it's tragic, but I'm going to give it to the blackouts. I think the blackouts are a fantastic narrative device.
And they use it really well for a lot of comedic effect as well. So I think that qualifies as a bit. Mine's a little, my bit's a little more focused, and it's specifically the Anna trying to tell him the story and continuing to black out and then show back up. And then at the end, him going, "What does that have to do with me?"
And then blacking out again.
I that's my favorite probably. And then what about quote, Sean? I think I know what your answer is.
So before I say the favorite one, I want to hit a couple lines that we kind of moved over, but I think are really fucking funny. When they're drinking at the beginning, one of the toasts that is made is to life and being done with it, which is like, holy shit. When they're at the AA meeting, Sarah Lynn says, booing is generally frowned upon here.
Yes, that's a good one.
Later on, Bojack says, that's what happens when you mix the appetite of a horse with the appetite of someone with a hole inside him that needs to be constantly filled with attention, booze, and sex. And then the last one that I have that we didn't talk about is, this is such a stupid joke. But at one point they're like, I found out who killed Princess Di.
Oh, yeah.
It was all of us.
Yeah. Well, and that's like going into when he was mixing up everybody's names and he was like, you be so-and-so and I'll be Princess Diana. Yeah. For sure. Good quotes. But your favorite's probably the "we're not doomed" quote from Bojack, right?
I'm actually going to swerve a little bit because I think that line is really good, but I think that trying to find the nicest way to say this. I feel like there's a moment that's more important to me that has that same idea. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to go with Anna's speech of, there are going to be times when you'll see someone in trouble. You're going to want to rush in there and do whatever you can to save them, but you have to stop yourself because there are some people you can't save because those people will thrash and struggle and try to take you down with them. I think that's my favorite quote of the episode.
Okay. Mine is going to be
Oh, God.
Man, Ohio sucks. Next time, could you almost molest someone who lives in Hawaii? You could be bummed out at a luau right now. From Sarah Lynn.
Jesus Christ. All right. I like when they're going to Ohio and they're like, we're in Ojai. And he's like, Ojai.
What are we doing? We drove all the way to Ojai? And she's like, Ohio.
Yeah. Which is much fucking farther. Even further. Yeah.
So, the final episode of season 3, episode 12, is titled That Went Well. No, sorry, let me say it the right way. That went well.
Oh, no.
Bojack hits rock bottom. Mr. Peanut Butter and Todd save the day. Princess Carolyn finds a new calling. It is an intentionally vague description of the episode for a lot of reasons. It got a 9.0 on IMDb. And it's a much funnier episode.
Okay.
But there are some tough moments in it.
Okay, so, okay.
Like a typical BoJack episode, right?
Yeah.
And it also features the return of character actress Margot Martin.
Oh, let's go. Still waiting for Vincent Adult Man to come back. I know he's going to. I was going to
say, the little boy that was Todd in this episode looks a lot like Vincent. And I was like, are they trying to say that's Vincent? And I looked it up, but Vincent's got one of those noses that turns up, and this boy, they purposely. But he just looks, the way his facial expressions, I was like, that looks a lot like Vincent. But
that's true.
Vincent has lighter hair and looks a bit different. So
he'll be back. Like the end of a Marvel credits, Vincent Adult Man will return in Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, I don't know that he will.
He's in that portal scene. Can somebody just Photoshop him into the portal scene at the end of Avengers Endgame for me?
No one is going to do that.
Please, thank you.
No one is going to do that. Anyway, so we'll be back next week with that episode, final episode of season 3. We appreciate you guys listening and watching. Sean, where can people find you?
You guys can find me right here. I'm also on Twitter at Sean_AFK. I think by the time these are going up, Rings of Power will be either over or just about to end. We've got a few weeks left. I think we've got 3 weeks left. So there's also, by the time this episode's out, we'll definitely be done with Rings of Power. But
yeah,
go back and listen to season 2 of Second Breakfast, because the second season is gearing up to a big finale, and I think it's going to be fun to talk about.
And we'll also be pretty close to Squid Game season 2 times as well when this episode comes out.
Yes.
So be coming up in a couple weeks. So look forward to that.
Yeah, that's
Squid
true.
Boys.
Yeah.
Squid Boys will be back in town, baby. Squid Game. The actual show, not the reality show.
But I will also say we're very excited for Squid Game's The Challenge season 2.
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you not excited for that?
I mean, I am, but not in the same way. Like in the way,
That was a good podcast.
Like
that
in
was
the
fun
way,
to talk about.
I'm driving down the highway and you see like a car crash and you're like, wow, that was like that filled adrenaline, and that was like crazy that I didn't get in that car crash. I hope everyone's okay. That's how I feel about Squid Game reality season 2.
I think we're going to have a good time with season 2.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
I'm ready.
I know you are. I don't know when that's coming out, but anyway, thank you everybody for listening and watching. And we will see you guys next week for the final episode of the season.
Dick sucked by a dumb shit.
Yeah, we might have to change that. We'll see.